Hello, my name is Dr. Glenn Pierce. My associate offered me an opportunity to come and talk about something that I have often pondered in my spare time. Of course, when he showed up, things were a little bit different than he expected, which is the reason of my current state. However, it will be enough to get by. You will not see me much, but I will be here. Today I am here to tell you a story. A story of 10 hikers where only one made it out alive. A time-honored tale of experienced hikers going off and never returning. However, this story is different. A story where the possibility of Russian-Soviet conspiracies within the military hold just as much weight as possible cryptid and alien attacks. So join me today as we uncover the incident at Dyatlov Pass. The Dyatlov Pass expedition consisted of 10 Russian students. Well, technically they were not all students, but they all set up from what would now be the Ural Federal University to hike up a then unnamed mountain to achieve their third class hiking credentials. It must be stated that they were already class 2 hikers, with the third class being the highest of all. These were not inexperienced amateur hikers, these were highly experienced, very talented hikers who would not have done amateur mistakes. It must also be stated that as we go on, everything I said could not be completely proven. I am working off of the best information that we have. However, almost every step of the story is contested by one or more theories or people. However, we shall now briefly give you a summary of what happened leading up to the incident. When they set out, there were originally 10 members. There was Igor Dyatlov, of which the pass would later be named, Yuri Doroshenko, Laidamiala Dubina, Yuri Krivashenko, Alexander Kolatav. I apologize for my pronunciation. It has been a while since I have studied my Russian. Zenaida Kolomongrov, Rustam Slobin, Nikolai Thibdox, Brignoles, Simon Zolotrov, and Yuri Yudin. The group set out on January 27th. They began their trek. On the 28th, one of their members, Yuri Yudin, who had suffered from several health ailments, had to turn back due to knee and joint pain, so he would not continue on the trek. He would die later in 2013, being the only member of this trek who would make it out alive. We must also remember that during this entire trip, there are many photos and diary entries written, of which many will be playing over while I speak to you. On the 31st, the group arrived at the edge of a highland area and began to climb. In a wooded valley, many speculate that they catch surplus food and equipment that they would use for the trip back. The next day, on the 1st of February, the hikers began to move through the pass. They had originally planned to make it over the pass and make camp on the opposite side, but due to the worsening weather conditions, these chaps were not able to do that. They managed to lose their direction and deviate far more west than they had intended. When they realized their mistake, they decided to set up camp there on the side of the mountain, rather than move down to the forested area that would have offered some shelter from the weather. Yudin speculated later that Dyatlov probably did not want to lose the altitude they had gained, or he decided to practice camping on the mountain slope. There is, however, an alternate theory that they chose to not be in the woods due to something far more sinister, with some backing. However, that will be discussed in the second part of this video. The investigation and discovery of their bodies must also be called heavily into question, with many of the searchers making conflicting claims, the investigation being poorly handled, the autopsies all being brought into question. This event has no certainties. There were rumors of Russian military agents finding the bodies and hiding them before the search party, and the leader even claimed that they found Russian military boots. However, nothing can be confirmed. It is all hearsay. Before the expedition began, Dyatlov agreed he would send a telegram to their club as soon as the group returned to Vizhai. It was expected that this would happen no later than the 12th of February. However, Yudin was assured before he departed that Dyatlov expected it to be longer. So when the 12th passed and no message was received, there was no immediate reaction, as delays of a few days were not uncommon. However, on the 20th, the relatives of these intrepid hikers were in an uproar, demanding a rescue operation. And so organizations of students and teachers set out. And of course, later, army and militia forces with planes and helicopters would be ordered to join this operation. On the 26th of February, the searchers found the group's abandoned and badly damaged tent. This is where the first mysteries begin. For the tent was torn, their shoes were discarded outside of it, along with many of the group's personal belongings left behind. This is intriguing. What would have caused such experienced hikers to leave behind all of their provisions? Furthermore, it was later highly speculated and almost completely confirmed that the tent was cut from the inside out. Whatever had scared these made them cut through the tent. They wouldn't exit through the zipper. They wouldn't huddle in it to survive. They would, in a panic, rip their way out of the tent. For whatever reason, in whatever way, something had scared them so badly that they left behind their only chances of survival. They also found 9 sets of footprints, left by people only wearing socks or a single shoe. Some were even barefoot, leading down to the nearby woods. It must also be noticed that they started off as panicked footprints, as if they were running, which would line up with the spooked theories. However, that would later change to a single file line with no other boots around. These hikers fled their tent and then, for whatever reason, organized themselves to walk farther down without ever making an attempt to return to their tent. Whatever had happened, they had no wish to go back to that tent. At the forest edge, under a large Siberian pine, the rescuers, or attempted rescuers, managed to find the visible remains of a fire. There were the first 2 bodies found of Krivoshenko and Doroshenko, shoeless and in their underwear. The branches on a tree above them were broken at least to 5 meters high. This suggests that one of the skiers had climbed up to look for something, or to possibly escape something. Now, both Krivoshenko and Doroshenko were dead by, well, the autopsy said hypothermia. Now, Doroshenko was found with particles of moss and pine in his hair, along with hair being burnt on the right side of his head. His face was covered in blood, a swollen upper lip, and a dark hemorrhage. His right cheek soft tissue was covered in a grey foam, and grey liquid was pouring from his mouth. The inner surface of his right shoulder had 2 abrasions with no bleeding, but 2 cuts to the skin. He was bruised all over his arms, with swelling on his hands, along with bruising and bleeding on them as well. His shoulders and arms were even further cut up and bruised. It must also be noted that the hypothermia are, well, called into question. For while the bruising and scrapes that he had suffered were consistent with falling or hitting rocks or such, they were not life-threatening. He also had damage to his chest cavity, as if someone had been pressing on it, and he could have fallen from a tree to produce the grey liquid. To produce the grey liquid, he would have most definitely needed some sort of force to his chest. However, that looked overlooked in the death report, and also his body was still making efforts to fight the freezing at the time of death. Doroshenko, I believe, could not have died of hypothermia. It does not line up. It must also be noted that many of the chest pressure were much less consistent with that of falling out of a tree and more consistent of a bomb or car crash. For the next few bodies and events, I will try and keep it brief as this recording runs long already and we must get into the theories. The next found body was that of Krivoshenko, who suffered many cuts and bruises and possible post-mortem animal violence. He was pronounced dead of hypothermia, and the evidence does line up, unlike the last. Next will be Dyatlov, of which the pass would be later named. He also faced minor bruising and cuts consistent with that of a scuffle or a few falls. He also had a missing incisor on his lower jaw. He was also claimed to have died due to hypothermia. The next will be Zenada Kolomaglov, of who also suffered her minor cuts and bruises and was also deceased by hypothermia, although this one was due to violent actions. Zenada was found not active in any intimate way, ruling out any possible criminal attack or fighting within the group due to rival lovers. And we come to Rostam Slobodin, who had hemorrhages in his muscles along with the scratches and bruising that all of them faced. However, he did also have a fracturing of a bone that was not seen on the others. He was believed to die of hypothermia. However, it is very contested on whether or not he actually died to freezing. Many believe he had fallen several times on his way down the mountain and had hit his head, which may have also easily led to his death. The last bodies we will discuss were found in a ravine with a makeshift shelter that seems as if these people were killed or died after the rest. Lidumila Dabina was found with the before mentioned scuffling fights. However, her nose was broken, her upper jaw was exposed with missing teeth and part of her lip. Her tongue had been removed, or thought it was removed during her pre-death state, and her eyes and eyeballs were missing. She was also found to not be active in any intimate way. Semyon Zolotovra was found with his eyeballs missing tissues around his eyes, with bone exposed and an open wound on the side of his skull, with a flailed chest and broken ribs. Next we have Alexander Kolenatov, who also had many injuries of open wounds at the formed neck, softened and whitened skin, the bridge of his nose to be unusually disformed. However, it was not necessarily broken. And we come to the last one, Nikolai Theraboxy. He had a bruise on his upper lip, a hemorrhage on the lower forearm, and multiple fractures to bone. This is the end of the hikers, all met with gruesome deaths. It must also be stated that many of the clothes were stripped off of those once they died to be worn by those who still survived. It must also be noted that the autopsy reports are highly contentious among those who study this case, as we know the Soviet authorities were not as helpful as they had once been thought. Many of the theories that are crafted around them of the more likely explanations state that perhaps a avalanche had happened, causing them to hear it and flee their tent in a mad panic, losing their way and falling to the cedar, where they would be falling over themselves, freezing, and unable to find their way back to the tent. Continued on, while 3 of them tried to make their way back. The other 4 would go into the ravine, where they would fall and sustain the brutal injuries that we see on their death. Other more likely scenarios include Russian military testing of a nuclear rocket, of which was later revealed that the Soviets did indeed send a rocket in the direction of the mountains. However, they claim it would have come nowhere close to where the people were staying. However, it must be noted that some were found with abnormal amounts of radiation, which would be explained by the nuclear testing theory. Now, I wish to take this brief interlude to appear before you again as your humble servant, to tell you that we are going into a much more, how do you say, conspiratorial territory. The theories presented from here on forth are outlandish to say the least, but this entire situation is outlandish. You must come in with an open head, willing to believe things you might not previously have believed in. But if you open your mind and look at the evidence, you will see these outlandish conspiracies, these things any normal person would write off. They are almost as possible as what the authorities believed happened. And look at me. I am outlandish, a creature that should not exist. Yet dear to old Joey, here I am. Weirder things have happened. Take everything said with a grain of salt and an open mind. One theory that has arisen is that some within these groups were Western spies for the Soviets, and the Russians, in an attempt to silence them, found them and killed them. It would explain the frantic attack and running away if the police had managed to catch them. It would explain why they would march down the hill in single file. However, it explains nothing else. The minor bruises and scratches are also explained by this. However, the more brutal ones, many of which are claimed to not have been possible by human hands, are unexplained by this theory. And the wide berth of which the people were killed also left mysterious according to this theory, and it seems unlikely. Another theory would be that perhaps a bomb went off near them, once again by the Soviet military testing. However, once again, the injuries and the deaths do not line up. A theory popular at the time, but since disproven, was that the local Mansi tribe had killed them, although they do not seem like a brutal tribe or one that would seek to kill people, and it has been most definitely disproven. Now, there is one more before we get into the truly iconic and well and far off theories that are proposed. This one would be that infrasound. It was made popular in the idea that small vibrations carried from the mountains drove them to do things they would not otherwise do. However, this theory leaves many unsolved. What were the minor scuffle injuries, and why would they all be affected in the same way? At the same time, it does not line up. However, it is an interesting theory to ponder. Now, for the last two theories I present, they are perhaps the two most outlandish and far-fetched theories. However, they both have considerable evidence behind them. The first would be that of a Yeti attack. This theory states that they met a Yeti while on their hikes, and, in fear of them, walked up the slope on purpose to pitch their tent away from the said Yetis. And yet they followed, and they were scared off by an attack. They had a quick scuffle with it that would cause their injuries. However, they moved farther down to the cedar tree, where two of them, already badly injured, would die under it, while three desperately managed to make their way back up to the tent to avoid the forest, but died along the way. The other four would go to the ravine, where they would be attacked again by the Yetis and sustain brutal injuries, and would later succumb to their death. This theory seems to me personally to be the most probable of the outlandish ones. That is, it would explain why they desperately left their tent, the bruising and scratches, and the brutal injuries sustained of the four in the ravine. However, there was no evidence of any Bigfoot-like tracks in the area, which does seem to mean that there were no Yeti attacks. However, there was a photo of a Yeti that was taken. Now, many people have suspected that this is not a Yeti, but rather a man in snow gear. and some have said that this is in proportion to a human man. But let me tell you, just because something is the same size of a man does in no way mean it is a man. And for the ski gear theory, have you ever seen a man in snow gear? They look nothing like this. They don't look like a solid color and solid furry outfit. That is not what they are like. There are seams, there are clothing pieces, not one solid block of fur. This photo is also completely undoctored and unedited, and a photo that itself disturbs adventure karma. The old fool is scared of a picture. As for why there were no tracks, well, many claim that the Russian military found the site long before the rescuers, so perhaps the Russians tried to cover up any signs of a Yeti attack. And the Mansi tribe that lives there locally also tells stories of Yeti-like beings. The last theory we shall speak about today is that of, wait for it, aliens. While outlandish at first, as many people would simply write this off by the mutterings of a delirious man, there is some evidence. Locals and people hiking only a few miles away reported strange lights in the sky near the time of these hikers' demises. And the people suffered many injuries that are consistent with cow mutilations across the globe. Furthermore, even the people themselves witnessed strange lights, with Dyatlov himself actually photographing two different light sources. However, one is damaged and it is unclear what he is truly pointing at. But they saw these lights, and it would explain the burn on one of their faces. Furthermore, the leader of the expedition, the original search and rescue expedition, later said that he saw the tops of pines burnt, as if a heat-based weapon had been shot indiscriminately at the trees. And he claimed that Soviet officials were asking him to cover up any signs of alien intervention. These are the theories. I will link below sites and sources. I hope you have enjoyed. This will conclude today's adventure. I will join you next month to dive into another perils of a interesting, terrifying situation. This was not the last you will see of me. I have enjoyed our time together, however brief. The incident at Dyatlov Pass will confuse and confound people for generations to come. Only 9 people could have told us what happened that night, and they are all dead. We will never know, but we can think, we can ponder, and for most, it's all that we can do, and it's all that we ever will do. And with that, I bid you adieu. This has been Dr. Glenn Pierce. Thank you to my associate for giving me the time to appear. Now, The demon is waiting. And so he returns. The ink demon's right-hand man. I'm coming for you. We may both be on the same side, but adventure karma will not keep me from your delicate throat, old man.